Nairobi. As the body of Tom Mboya was on its way to All Saints Roman Catholic Cathedral,
Nairobi, July 5th, 1969. A quiet Saturday afternoon, in the heart of the city, a well-dressed man steps out of a pharmacy on Government Road. He smiles, he's unaware he's being followed. And then a single gunshot tears through the air. One shot, one man down. A country frozen in disbelief. That man was Tom Mboya, a brilliant young leader, a rising star, a threat to the powerful. He wasn't just a politician, he was a visionary, a pan-Africanist, and one of the architects of Kenyan independence. But in a country struggling to find its identity, some saw his ambition as dangerous. His assassination would change everything. It would reveal deep fractures in Kenya politics, ignite ethnic tension, and spark one of the biggest mysteries in the country's history. Who wanted Tom Mboya dead and why? Welcome to Dark Echoes, where every crime leaves a lingering whisper. We dive into the shadows of true crime, uncovering the chilling stories that refuse to stay buried. If you're drawn to the dark and curious, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and join the conversation. Let the echoes begin. Tom Joseph Mboya was born on August 15, 1930 in Kilimambogo, a small village near Thika in colonial Kenya. His father was a sisal farm worker, and that's where young Tom Mboya would spend much of his early life. He didn't come from privilege, he didn't come from power, but from a young age, Tom Mboya stood out. He was sharp, ambitious, and restless. As a teenager, he attended St. Mary's School in Yala and later moved to Holy Ghost College in Mango. There, he was exposed to the teaching of Catholic missionaries, but also to the brutal reality of colonial rule. Black students were taught they were second-class citizens. Mboya didn't accept that. He believed in merit and he believed in change. After finishing school, he trained as a sanitary inspector, one of the few government jobs available to the Africans at the time. But he quickly realized that power to change lives didn't lie in inspecting toilets, it lay in organizing people. Mboya became active in labor movements and soon joined the Nairobi Local Government Workers Union. He had found his calling, not just as an organizer, but as a powerful voice to the voiceless. By the early 1950s, he was already shaking up the system. He rose through the ranks of the labor movement with lightning speed. By 1953, just 23 years old, he became the General Secretary of the Kenyan Local Government Workers Union. He was articulate, fearless, and impossible to ignore. At a time when most African leaders were still in the shadows, Mboya was speaking confidently at an international conference. His speeches were sharp, his English flawless. The British saw him as the acceptable African, educated, moderate, not aligned with the Mau Mau rebellion that was spreading across the country. But Mboya was not naive. While he didn't support the violence of the Mau Mau, he understood its roots. He saw the injustices of land theft, forced labor, and racial segregation. He wanted independence, not chaos. And so, while Kenyatta and other nationalist leaders were being imprisoned, Mboya kept the flame alive on the outside. In 1957, Kenya held its first elections with limited African representation. Mboya ran for office and won. At just 27, he became the youngest member of the Legislative Council. From that point on, he was unstoppable. He founded the Kenya independence movements, which later merged into the Kenya African National Union, the party that would lead the country to independence. Mboya was at the center of it all. His charisma crossed ethnic lines. Though he was a Luo, he drew support from across Kenya: Kikuyu, Kamba, Luya, and others. He didn't play tribal politics. He played national politics. And he wasn't just focused on Kenya. Mboya was a Pan-Africanist, deeply inspired by the government of Ghana, Nigeria, and South Africa. He worked with leaders like Kwame Nkrumah and Julius Nyerere. He believed that African nations had to rise together, not apart. One of his boldest moves came in the late 1950s when he organized the Airlift Program, a massive initiative to send young East African students to study in the United States. It wasn't just about education, it was about preparing a new generation of African leaders, thinkers, scientists, economists who would build the continent after independence. Amongst those students was Barack Obama Sr., father of the future US president. The airlift caught the attention of American politics, including John F. Kennedy, who supported it through the Kennedy Foundation. Mboya wasn't just admired in Africa, he was becoming an international icon. By 1963, Kenya had gained independence. Mboya was appointed Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs in the new government. Later, he served as Minister of Economic Planning and Development. He was young, brilliant, and seen by many as the natural successor of President Jomo Kenyatta. But power attracts enemies. Mboya was increasingly seen as a threat by those within Kenyatta's inner circle, especially amongst the Kikuyu elites who felt he was rising too fast, too boldly. Whispers of tribal favoritism began to circulate. Mboya, a Luo, was seen by some as too ambitious, too close to the West, too clever for his own good. And yet, he continued to push forward. He oversaw Kenya's economic planning, introduced industrial reforms, and worked to ensure Kenya didn't become a dictatorship. He believed in democracy, in a merit-based society, and in uplifting all Kenyans, not just a few. But the tension was building. In parliament, in cabinet meetings, in backroom dealings, Mboya was being edged out. He was still powerful, still popular with the people, but something had shifted. He knew it, and so did his enemies. By the end of 1960s, Tom was not just a leader. He was a symbol of what Kenya would be and of what some feared it might become. And then, in 1969, at just 38 years old, he was gunned down in broad daylight. It was Saturday, July 5th, 1969. Nairobi was calm, the city humming with its usual energy. The streets of Government Road, now known as Moi Avenue, bustled with people going about their business. No one knew that within moments, history would be rewritten in blood. Tom Mboya had come to town from his home in Lavington. He wasn't scheduled for any public engagements that day. He was simply running errands, personal errands. Just before 1 p.m., he walked into Shani's pharmacy, a popular Indian-owned chemist located just off the streets. He was unaccompanied, no bodyguard, no entourage, just him, the man many considered the future president of Kenya. Eyewitnesses remember it clearly. Mboya was smiling, relaxed. He exchanged a few words with the pharmacist, picked up what he needed, and stepped out onto the sunlit sidewalk. That's when it happened. A man emerged from a nearby alley, walked up to him calmly, and fired. A single bullet tore through Mboya's chest. He staggered, then collapsed onto the pavement. Chaos erupted. Pedestrians screamed. Some ran for cover. Others rushed to his side. Blood began to pool beneath his body. His white shirt, once crisp and clean, turned crimson. Tom Mboya was still conscious. Reports say he tried to speak, maybe to identify his attacker, but the damage was too great. A car pulled up, and with the help of bystanders, his body was rushed to Nairobi hospital. The doctors worked desperately to save him, but it was too late. At just 38 years old, Tom Mboya was gone. Word of his death spread like wildfire. Within hours, Nairobi was in mourning, and then in uproar. Angry crowds gathered outside the hospital, shouting for justice. Some wept, others called it what it was, an assassination, a political hit. Kenya, young, hopeful, and only 6 years into independence, had just lost one of its brightest lights. The public wanted answers, and fast. Within 48 hours, police arrested a man, Nahashan Isaac Njenga Njoroge, a former police officer. He had been seen near the scene. Witnesses claimed he had been loitering around the pharmacy earlier that day. When police searched his home, they reportedly found a Tokarev pistol, a Soviet-made handgun, and a briefcase containing papers that linked him to the shooting. He was charged with murder, but something didn't sit right. Why would a lone man kill one of the most prominent politicians in the country in broad daylight, in the middle of the capital? And then came the chilling words that would haunt the case forever. As he was being taken away by police, Njoroge is said to have muttered, "Why don't you go after the big man?" Who was the big man? That single question cracked open a Pandora box of conspiracy theories, political tension, and tribal unrest. Many believed Mboya's murder wasn't random. It was a message, a warning, a strategic removal of a man who had become too popular, too powerful, and too independent in a system dominated by ethnic loyalty and political paranoia. In the days that followed, violence broke out in Luo-dominated regions. Protesters clashed with police. The government, led by the President Jomo Kenyatta, responded with force, but the anger wouldn't fade. At Tom Mboya's burial in Rusinga Island, over 100,000 people gathered. It was one of the largest funerals in Kenya history. Among them were foreign dignitaries, political allies, and ordinary Kenyans, all united in grief but divided in fear. Kenyatta did not attend, and that silence, that absence, only deepened the suspicion. Mboya's widow, Pamela, stood stoically beside the coffin. His young children looked lost. They had just lost their father. Kenya had just lost a future president. In court, Njoroge was convicted and sentenced to death. He was hanged in 1970. But the question remained, did he act alone? Some believe Njoroge was just a pawn, a triggerman paid to do a job, while the real mastermind stayed hidden behind curtains of power. Others believe he was a disgruntled man with his own motives. The truth was buried along with the body of Tom Mboya. The bullet that killed him wasn't just a weapon of death. It was a weapon of silence. It silenced a man who dared to dream differently, a man who believed in unity over tribalism, merit over loyalty, progress over fear. And it sent a message to anyone else who thought they could rise too fast, too far, without playing the political game. To this day, Tom Mboya assassination remains one of the Kenya's greatest tragedies and one of its deepest mysteries. In the hours following Tom Mboya assassinations, Nairobi was teetering between shock and rage. The government needed to respond quickly to calm the public, contain the protest, and most of all, find the killer. Police moved fast. Within 2 days, they announced the arrest of Nahashan Isaac Njoroge, a former police officer reportedly dismissed from the service in 1967. He was arrested at his home in Bahati Estates, a low-income neighborhood in Nairobi. The authorities claimed to have recovered a Tokarev pistol from his residence. the same type of gun believed to have been used in the shooting. Ballistics tests allegedly matched the bullet removed from Mboya's body to the gun found in Njoroge's home. It seemed like an open and shut case, but the public wasn't convinced, and neither were the political observers. The timing, the evidence, the motive or lack thereof. It all felt too convenient. Njoroge made headlines again when, while being escorted by police, he reportedly blurted out the chilling phrase, "Why don't you go for the big man?" That one sentence set Kenya on fire. Who was the big man? Was it someone high in government? Someone in Kenyatta's inner circle? Someone threatened by Mboya's rising political influence? The police never pursued that lead. Instead, they built a case focused entirely on Njoroge, painting him as a bitter, lone gunman with no political affiliations. They claimed he had no clear motive but was mentally unstable. A personal grudge, perhaps, a delusion, a madman acting on his own. But in a country already drowning in tribal politics, this narrative fell flat. Tom Mboya was not just any man. He was a cabinet minister, a likely successor to the presidency, one of the most guarded political figures in Kenya, and he was assassinated in public, in broad daylight, without any security nearby. People began to ask deeper questions. Why was Tom Mboya walking alone that day? Why has his security detail been pulled? Why did President Kenyatta refuse to attend his funeral? Was this just neglect? Or was it an orchestration? As the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, diplomats, and political allies watched closely. Njoroge sat in the dock, expressionless. The prosecution rallied heavily on physical evidence, the pistol, ballistics, and witness testimonies. Several witnesses claimed to have seen him near the scene. Others identified him fleeing the area shortly after the gunshots. But curiously, the trial moved quickly, too quickly. There were no investigation into potential accomplices, no cross-examination of higher political figures, and no mention of Njoroge's cryptic reference to the big man. Even stranger, when Njoroge's defense team requested a psychological evaluation to test his sanity, the court denied it. Instead, the judge ruled that he was sane and fit to stand trial. On October 10, 1969, just 3 months after the assassination, Njoroge was found guilty of murder. He was sentenced to death by hanging. He never spoke publicly again, and on November 9th, 1970, he was executed. Just like that, the man was murdered. The man who murdered Tom Mboya was silenced forever. But justice, many believed, had not been served. To the public, this wasn't just about one man's guilt. It was about the conspiracy of silence that followed. A murder of this magnitude against a sitting cabinet minister should have triggered a national inquiry, a commission, a full investigation into motive and network. But it didn't. No inquiry was launched, no politician was questioned, no document was declassified. The government moved on swiftly, decisively, and without looking back. The Luo community from which Mboya came was devastated. Many believed the assassination was ethnically motivated, a calculated move by Kikuyu-dominated elite to prevent a Luo from ascending to the presidency. The tribal tension exploded 3 months later when another prominent Luo politician, Agwings Kodhek, died in a suspicious car crash. By then, many saw a pattern. The message was clear. Those who rose too far would be cut down. And so, Tom Mboya's murder became more than a death. It became a symbol, a betrayal of state power unchecked, and of the dangers of political ambition in fragile post-colonial states. To this day, Kenya has never reopened the case. Documents remain sealed, allegation remains uninvestigated. The identity of the so-called big man, if he ever existed, remained a haunting mystery. Tom Mboya's family never received full closure. His widow, Pamela, quietly retreated from public life. His children grew up without their father. some of them never fully understanding why he was taken from them. And the country, it moved forward, but with a scar that still marks its politics, its tribal divides, its fears of ambition, and its silence. Because behind the official story of the trial, behind the charges, the conviction, and the execution, lies a deeper question. Was justice truly served? Or was Tom Mboya's killer just another pawn in a game much larger and much darker? Imagine if Tom Mboya had lived. Imagine what Kenya might look like if he guided it through its early decades of independence, uniting rather than dividing, building institutions rather than patronage network, investing in minds rather than manipulating loyalties. We'll never know, but maybe that's why his legacy matters to us, because it leaves us with a choice to accept the story we were given or to ask deeper questions, to continue the divisions or build the unity he believed in, to forget or to remember, not just the way he died, but the way he lived, and to ask ourselves, what would Tom Mboya do today? Would he still be fighting for workers? Would he still be teaching in a university? Would he be mentoring the next generation of Kenyan leaders? Or would he be standing before the nation, still holding that file, still speaking boldly, and still daring us to dream? Thanks for joining us on Dark Echoes, where the shadows speak and the past never stays silent. If this story sent chills down your spine, make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share the mysteries with someone who loves true crime. Until next time, listen closely. The echoes are never far behind.